The one choice that changed everything. Why I regret moving into a nursing home at 78. At 78 years old, I thought I was making a wise and practical decision. I had lived a full life, raised children, worked hard, and created a home filled with memories. But when my health started to decline, I began to feel unsure about what the future held. The doctor told me I needed help managing my daily life, and my children gently encouraged me to consider moving into a nursing home, suggesting that it would be easier, safer, and less stressful. They said it would give me the care I needed while also providing a supportive community of people my age. I hesitated at first. I loved my independence, my space, and the comfort of the life I had built over the years. I thought I would be fine on my own, but as my health continued to decline, I started to worry. My children reassured me that it was the right decision. They promised that I'd be taken care of, that there would be social activities and a sense of community, and that I would never feel alone. I trusted them. I packed up my belongings, said goodbye to the home I had cherished for decades, and moved into a nursing home. At the time, I believed this would be the next chapter in my life, one where I could relax and receive the care I needed. But what I didn't know was that this decision would turn out to be one I'd regret deeply. Looking back, there are so many things I wish I had understood before making the choice that has forever altered the course of my life. Here is what I've learned and why. At 78, I wish I had made a different decision. Lesson 1. Independence is easy to lose, but almost impossible to regain. Before moving into the nursing home, I was used to living on my own terms. I had always been self-sufficient. I cooked my meals, did my laundry, cleaned my house, and took care of myself. My house wasn't large, but it was my sanctuary. I could get up when I wanted, eat what I felt like, and go for a walk whenever I pleased. It may not have been glamorous, but it was my routine, and it gave me a sense of control over my life. But that all changed when I moved into the nursing home. Suddenly, my days no longer revolved around my needs or preference. Meals were scheduled at specific times, and no matter how I felt, I had to eat when they told me. If I wanted a cup of tea, I had to wait for someone to bring it to me, or I had to go down the hall to the common area. If I needed to go outside, I had to request it, and it wasn't always guaranteed that I could go when I wanted. At first, I tried to resist. I asked if I could prepare my own meals, or at least have some freedom over when I ate. I wondered if I could take my meals in my room and enjoy a bit of peace. But the answer was always the same. We have rules to ensure your safety and well-being. As the days went on, I realized how much I missed the simple joys of independence. The ability to make my own decisions, to come and go as I pleased, to cook what I wanted, when I wanted. The more I adapted to the routine of the nursing home, the more I lost control of my own life. What I thought would be a simple transition to a safer and easier life became an unrelenting loss of autonomy. And the truth is, once you give up your independence in a place like this, it's nearly impossible to regain it. Lesson 2. Loneliness doesn't always come from being alone. One of the main reasons I agreed to move into the nursing home was the promise of social interaction. You won't be alone anymore, my children assured me. You'll be surrounded by people your age, and there will always be something to do. You'll have company. At first it sounded perfect. I had spent many years alone, and the thought of being around others seemed appealing. I imagined enjoying coffee with new friends, chatting with people who understood what it was like to be my age. But being surrounded by people doesn't necessarily mean you won't feel alone. At home, I had my own routine. I wasn't always social, but I had close friends who visited regularly. My daughter and son would drop by when they could, and my neighbors were always ready to chat when we passed each other in the yard. Even though I spent time by myself, I didn't feel isolated, because I had meaningful connections. In the nursing home, it was different. I was surrounded by people, yes, but they were mostly strangers. Some were friendly, but many kept to themselves, and others were too ill to have a conversation. I missed the company of familiar faces, the comfort of long-standing friendships, and the warm feeling of being part of a community where people knew me. At first, my family visited often. My daughter would come every Sunday, and my son called every Wednesday. But as time went on, the visits became less frequent. They had their own lives to manage, and I understood, but understanding didn't make the loneliness easier to bear. I would sit by the window and watch cars pull into the parking lot, hoping one of them was coming to visit me. I knew that my family loved me, but I felt forgotten. It wasn't that they didn't care, but life had moved on, and I had become a distant part of their routine. The loneliness crept in slowly but deeply, and it wasn't always about being physically alone. It was the emotional isolation that weighed the heaviest. Lesson 3. When you stop moving, you start fading. Before I moved into the nursing home, I was active in my own way. I didn't run marathons, but I stayed busy. I took walks in the mornings, did my own gardening, and kept up with daily chores. I wasn't as spry as I used to be, but I didn't let that stop me from moving. The movement kept me going, both physically and mentally. But in the nursing home, movement became optional. Meals were brought to me, my room was cleaned by staff, and there was no need for me to move around much at all. If I needed something, I pressed a button, and someone would bring it to me. At first this felt like a luxury. I could rest when I wanted to, without worrying about a thing. But soon, I began to realize that the less I moved, the weaker I became. I struggled to walk down the hall. I found it harder to get up from a chair. I had grown used to the convenience of having everything done for me, but my body didn't respond well to the inactivity. The more I sat still, the more my muscles began to atrophy. One day, I struggled to stand up, and it frightened me. I had seen it happen to other residents, people who were once capable of walking on their own, but now relied on walkers, or worse, wheelchairs. I realized too late that comfort can be dangerous. When you stop challenging your body, it begins to deteriorate. And in a place where convenience takes precedence over activity, it's easy to stop using your body altogether. Lesson 4. Privacy and dignity are priceless, until you lose them. Before I moved into the nursing home, I had privacy, real privacy. I could shut my door when I wanted to be alone, and I had control over my space. My house was my sanctuary, and I didn't take that for granted. In the nursing home, privacy became a luxury. Staff would come in at all hours to check on me, sometimes without warning. While I understood the need for safety checks, it didn't always feel respectful. I was asked to share a room with another person, and while most roommates were kind, not all were. Some people had dementia, and didn't know where they were, or who they were with. Others were difficult, or unpleasant to share space with. I remember Margaret, a woman who had been placed in a room with someone who screamed at night due to her dementia. Margaret hadn't slept in days, but no one seemed to be able to help her. She told me once, "I just want peace." But peace, it seemed, was not something we could choose here. It wasn't just about sharing a room. It was about the loss of control over even the smallest parts of my life. I couldn't close the door and be alone when I needed to be. I couldn't have a moment's peace without someone coming in to check on me, or ask if I needed anything. There is something deeply personal about having privacy, the ability to control your own space, to have time to yourself, to maintain your dignity. I had lost that, and it was a far greater loss than I had imagined. Lesson 5. Leaving isn't as simple as you think. When I moved into the nursing home, I told myself that I could always leave, if I didn't like it. I reassured myself that it wasn't permanent, and that I could go back home whenever I wanted. After all, it was my home, but leaving wasn't as simple as I thought. My house still stood empty, but it wasn't the same. The longer I stayed in the nursing home, the more I lost touch with the life I had known. I no longer kept up with my routine. My energy levels had decreased, and even the thought of managing a house on my own felt daunting. My family had already adjusted to the idea of me staying in the home, and when I suggested returning, they gently reminded me that it would be difficult to maintain my house on my own again. I realized then that I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. My house was still there, but my life in it had already ended. I don't regret aging. I don't even regret needing assistance. What I regret is thinking that moving into a nursing home was my only option. If I could go back in time, I would have explored other options, perhaps in-home care, or a family member's house, or even making adjustments to my own home, to make it more accessible. But most of all, I wish I had understood that once you leave your home, you can't just walk back in. Life moves on, and sometimes there are choices you can't undo. If you're facing this decision, please take your time. Think it through carefully. Once you leave, things will never be the same.